Hi, I'm Alex Mitchell and I'm the creator of Cancer Stories. Cancer Stories is a video diary program which is designed to help people like yourself manage their cancer. And the key aim is to record previous patients' experiences, really a wide variety of cancers. And these are patients who are genuine, real patients from Leicestershire who've given their consent to allow us to record their story onto DVD or the internet. What we ask those patients is really to give a brief account over 30 or 60 minutes. How did they manage with their diagnosis? And hopefully by watching their account you'll be able to pick out some common themes from one or more of those videos. And those common themes might be things like what resources are available locally or nationally, or how do families cope, or how do people themselves manage with those awkward stages, either the initial diagnosis or the complications of treatment, or perhaps psychological and emotional complications which are sometimes overlooked. So overall, we hope that by watching the video diary program you'll be able to take some positives from other people's accounts, and hopefully that will help you better cope with your situation, whatever that is at the current time. Thanks for watching.
My name's Marion Peutrill. I'm aged 49 and I live at home with my husband and my 2 daughters, and I have 3 children altogether. I have a son who lives away in St Albans, who is 25. The 2 daughters are 23 and 19. The middle daughter has just given birth to my first grandson, who is now 3 weeks old and the apple of everybody's eye. Before I was diagnosed, I was a school teacher. I taught in a secondary school, I taught English, and I was also a head of year, having a lot of responsibilities, particularly for children with emotional difficulties, as well as involved in the discipline. Unfortunately, on the 10th of September 2012, the same day as my middle daughter's birthday, I was diagnosed with a very advanced breast cancer.
Let me say then, for the viewers, Marion has come in today, and thanks for joining us here on the video diary program we call Cancer Stories. You know, this is about giving something about your experience, what you've learned over the time, and sharing that with future patients and families who may be interested in what you've been through. And I know we only met a few times so far, but you've been through quite a lot, I think, in a short space of time. Let's start with the way the diagnosis came about. How was the breast cancer found in your case?
In my case, it was a very large lump that came up very quickly. It was a surprise. It kind of came out of nowhere. I had had mammograms in the past because I had had breast lumps in both 2006 and 2009, but they were both diagnosed as fibrocystic breast lumps. So when this lump came out of nowhere, it was around the same area as the fibrocystic ones had been. So I didn't panic initially, and I didn't rush to my doctor, which I do regret. It took about 8 weeks to finally see my GP. When I saw my GP, he looked at it and said, yes, it possibly is still fibrocystic, but I'll send you for a mammogram anyway. That came through within a week. By that time, my lump was covered the whole entire breast and the skin had become quite red. I had a mammogram to start with and was then called in for an ultrasound. and there were two people who did the ultrasound plus the nurse, and to be honest, it was quite obvious from the way they were reacting to me that it wasn't fibrocystic, that it was actually a cancerous lump. After the ultrasound, during the ultrasound, they took biopsies of both the lump and underneath my arm. They took 3 lymph node biopsies as well as 2 biopsies from the large lump. Then when I was called in to see the doctor, I was given the diagnosis pretty much there and then. They said that the mammogram had come out at a 5, which meant it was malignant. The ultrasound had come out at a 5, which meant it was malignant. And the physical examination had come out at 5, which was malignant. But they couldn't be 100% sure until they got the results of the biopsies, which would be a week later on the 17th. I wasn't on my own, I was with my mother at the time. They put us into a side room and gave us a cup of tea. I didn't cry at the time at all. In fact, I had a very strange reaction. All I really wanted to do was walk. We went and had a blood test because they told us to go and have a blood test quickly. But once we'd done that, we called my father to come and collect us, but I just felt I wanted to walk and walk and walk and walk. I wasn't frightened, not upset, I just wanted to walk.
Mm. Did you reflect on that very difficult initial period then during that walk, and were you able to take in a bit more information having kind of got away from it a little bit?
No, because I wasn't actually able to walk because my father picked me up and we called my husband to come home to tell him. So all I was really able to do was walk around the house. And odd things come into your head. Have I got enough life insurance? That kind of thing. But I only cried, I think, when my husband came in, and then only for the tiniest of little bit of time. And then my next reaction was, I cannot possibly tell my daughter it's her birthday today. Mm. You know, the reaction was to protect my daughter. You know, how could I tell her that news on her birthday? She'd got a big night out planned out for the Tuesday with my other daughter, the 2 of them, and all of their friends were going out on the next day. The youngest daughter knew where I was going and was on a day out, and she was sort of texting me on her way home and sort of saying, how did it go? And I was fobbing her off, couldn't tell her the truth because I didn't want to spoil the birthday of the oldest daughter or their night out. She did at one point text and say, so it's definitely not breast cancer then. And I did break down and cry then because I knew I was still going to have to hide the truth from them. Got away with it, talked to them when they both came in and pretended it was all okay and talked about other things. Went to bed. My friend came round the next morning and the youngest daughter came down after she'd gone and said, and she burst into tears and said, you're going to have to tell me now why you and Dad aren't at work, because you never take a day off work, Mum, and Dad's always at work. So we did have to tell her, but then I was very cruel and I said to her, but you mustn't tell the older daughter because I don't want you to spoil her night out. And she was incredibly brave and they had their night out without the daughter whose birthday it was being spoiled. And then I told the other daughter on the Wednesday. Mm. Couldn't tell my son because he lived down in St Albans and it wasn't the kind of thing I could tell him over the telephone. So I went down that weekend and told him and said, can you get a week off work? He said yes. So he came back with us on the Sunday as we were going to get the full results of the biopsies on the Monday. So on the Monday, all of them were there to get the results of the biopsy.
It's difficult, isn't it, knowing what to say to family members who you don't want to upset. You've got the information yourself, at least some of the information, and you're not sure also how they're going to react. But eventually they did get to know. And what was their reaction overall?
Again, I think they took their reaction from me because I wasn't tearful, because I am a very strong and practical head-on person. Right, okay, if this is what I've got to deal with, then bring it on, let's start it. Because I was like that, they kind of took their reaction from them. There were a few tears and a bit of shock, but not lots of tears because I wasn't crying.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Did you feel over time that their reactions changed, or they kind of came to their own acceptance of the issue? I mean, the story hasn't finished, has it? Because further information came along. Maybe we should talk about that first, and then people will be able to catch up in terms of, understanding where you're coming from.
Okay. My journey was initially that I had to have chemotherapy to try and reduce the lump because it was so big. First session did reduce it quite considerably and took all the redness away. Second session took it away from the chest wall so that they could at some point operate. But because it was so aggressive, the further 4 sessions of chemotherapy didn't make a great deal of difference. And after the 6th and final lot of chemotherapy, in 1 week, the lump grew back to the same size as it was originally. Even the surgeon and the oncologist were a little concerned at that point. Mm-hmm. So it was just operate as soon as possible. When they operated, when I got the results of the operation, they weren't good. I was told that they had taken away a tumour that was 10.5 centimetres, that wasn't all cancerous, that a lot of the mass was precancerous, but within that mass there were 30 individual cancers. Mm-hmm. That 12 out of 15 lymph nodes were infected, and that it was starting to infect the blood too. So there was no room for any more messing about. They had to get onto the radiotherapy very quickly. So I had the usual 15 lots of radiotherapy. At the end of that, that finished on the 23rd of April. I went in because I was due to start work, even met everybody, because the plan was that I was going to go back to work on the 3rd of June. But I started to deteriorate and my leg wasn't behaving as it should. And there was obviously signs that things weren't quite right. I was booked in for a scan, a CT scan of the body on the 3rd of the 5th, which was going to give me the all clear and send me off happy that right this minute there was no cancer and that I could go back to work. Unfortunately, on the 5th of the 5th, I was taken into hospital and had to have a CT scan to my brain because the CT scan on the 3rd had shown that the cancer had already spread to my liver and to my bones. The CT scan on the Sunday night showed that it had also spread to my brain, which was causing the problems with my leg. So on the 5th of the 5th, I was told that actually it was not a case that I was clear, that actually it had spread considerably. I'd already done my research, so I knew that once it had gone to the brain, that was going to leave me in a terminal position. So I am now in a position where things are terminal. My 2 daughters were with me when I was taken to the hospital. My husband did tell them that it had gone into the brain, but they didn't fully realise at that point quite the implications of that. It took the week in hospital for them to fully realise the implications of that. They have found that quite difficult to take in. But again, because I'm quite philosophical, because I'm practical, and looking at getting on with things, it's very difficult for them to sit and cry and feel sad, because I'm not, and I don't intend to be. I intend to be as strong as I can. At the moment, my doctors have managed to get me in a stable position. The medications I'm on have left me in a stable position, and as long as I'm stable, I will make the most of what time I've got left.
That's a very admirable outlook in a way, and one I'm sure many people will take some inspiration from, definitely. I'm just wondering whether, when you had that kind of additional piece of information that the cancer was, in your words, terminal, meaning that there wasn't really a treatment that was available and it probably would deteriorate, was that information that you really gathered yourself because you were looking for information, online and, doing your own research? Or was there a difficult appointment when, you met with the medical staff and they really had to tell you that?
No, because they were honest right from the start. And I think I probably asked the question, how long have I got? Mm-hmm. When I was in hospital, because they did keep me in hospital for a week once I'd had the initial CT scan, they wanted to do an MRI scan to the brain. They also wanted to consult with the Queen's Medical Centre to see whether there would be any value in doing an operation to drain some of the fluid from the brain.
Yeah.
So there's like the multidisciplinary team, and they came to the decision that no, there wasn't any point in operating, that the best plan was to go through steroids, radiotherapy to the brain, and then further chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. And they were very open about that, and they told me right from the beginning that there would be a treatment plan. And I think knowing that there was going to be a treatment plan, even though I knew it was going to be terminal, meant that I wasn't so scared. It wasn't a case of, that's it, we know you're terminal, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
There's always been the, yes, it is going to get you, but we're going to do everything we can for as long as we can.
And that's a key point for everyone, really, that if you feel your team's involved and signed up with you to support you through the whole journey, it makes things more bearable, even if you've got further bad news or information that you didn't want. If you feel they're on your side, that can make a big difference.
Yes, definitely. And I've always felt that. I have a lot of faith in both my oncologist and both his registrars. And I know that he was gutted, that it wasn't the outcome that he was expecting on the 3rd of the 5th.
Yes.
And he has been very, very supportive all along the way. I have a lot of faith and trust in him, and that makes a big difference.
Let me talk about what comes next for people who have received very difficult information. For example, the cancer is progressive, or the condition is time limited, it's terminal in a way. What was your initial reaction emotionally to that?
Whilst I was in hospital, it was almost like being in a bubble. And with a round of constant visitors, I kind of was okay. And it was the visitors who were struggling more than I was. But as soon as I came home, that's when it kind of really hit me. And I kind of fell into a bit of a black space where time didn't make sense. And I couldn't get a grip of time. Every second seemed like an hour. And it felt like I had to be making the most of every second. And I did take to my bed for a couple of days. And that's not me. That's not the kind of person I am at all. And it upset my children, and was very difficult for my husband as well to watch the person who has always been very strong and very spirited kind of disappear. And my youngest daughter kind of came up and she stood at the end of the bed and she said, "Mum, you're going to have to get out of that bed. Sooner or later you're going to have to get out of that bed because you're just upsetting the rest of us, and it's not you." And that was kind of a bit of a wake-up call. And then my two sisters said to me, let's go to the pictures. And I went to the cinema with them. And that was kind of a turning point, because I sat through, it happened to be The Great Gatsby, and it's quite a long film. And I was able to realise that actually I'd sat there and I hadn't spent the whole 2 hours focusing on time and the cancer. It really was a big turning point. And from then on, I did then go and see my GP. I've been given a very mild anti-anxiety pill and a sleeping tablet, but that's all. And I'm in a much better place now. So kind of after a week, I'd pulled myself up really out of that, because I couldn't bear for my family to be seeing me like that. And it wasn't me, it just didn't feel me. I'm not a person who sits and wallows and feels sorry for themselves. So I just wasn't going to carry on.
Do you think it's tempting to give up for people in general, faced with very bad news, that it's tempting to think, well, what's the point carrying on now?
I can see that why you could, but I don't think it makes you feel any better at all. During that week, I wasn't happy. I am much, much happier now, because it's me, it's the real me. The person who does get on with things, who is practical. No, you don't help yourself. It's difficult and it's not easy to pull yourself up, and you may need support from others to do it, but do it. It is worth it. Don't wallow. Don't just think, I've only got 3, I've only got 6 months. There's no point in anything. There is. You make the most of what short time you've got left.
So in a way, what you're saying is it's important to regather that former you, the you that and the people love. You want to capture that again and be able to do things that you want to do. And the question then is how to do that. What can you kind of aim for? Given you might be held back a little bit by complications like the leg, or in other people's case, other symptoms. Is it difficult to put those issues to one side, and the psychological burden of feeling that time that you've got left is running out? That can be quite oppressive. How would you advise people put that to one side and concentrate on some positives?
By making small plans and having small goals. I've put together a small, what I call a bucket list, which isn't my own invention. It comes from film, I think, but it's little things. Yes, I'm not going to be able to fly. I would have loved to have gone to Niagara Falls. That's not going to happen. But little things. I'd always wanted to do something silly and frivolous. I've always been a very sensible person. So on my birthday on the 7th of June, I had a small party with all my closest friends, wore a pink wig, pink tutu, and I danced on the table, because I've never danced on the table in my life. And yes, it was silly, but it was something I wanted to do, and it was a memory that my friends and family will have of me just for once being silly and dancing on a table. They don't have to be big things, little things, spending time with my grandson, giving him his first bath. I've had a photo makeover, because that's something I've never done. I'm taking my youngest daughter for a spa day, because I took my older daughter when she was 21. I won't be around when the other one's 21, so I'm doing that now. They are little things. Weekends away in London, weekends away with friends. They're not big things, but it's about enjoying the time that you've got left, making the most of it, not sitting at home wallowing. They don't have to be big, but there are things to look forward to, and then after that, I've given myself little things to aim for, to still be around for the christening of my grandson. It's my 30th wedding anniversary on the 20th of August. I aim to be well for that. Then after that, if things are still going well, then I'll be aiming to be around for my grandson's first Christmas. I can't look too far forward because I don't know how long it's going to be. I just have small goals in the future and things that I'm going to fill up the time with that I want to do in the gaps in between.
I think the beauty of the bucket list is it introduces you to new things, new experiences, rather than just concentrating on things that you perhaps can't quite do. You know, we've got previous abilities and skills and activities that maybe we can do some of them, but not all. And there is a temptation when you're not very well is to think, well, what have I lost? What can't I do? And concentrate on the losses. But the bucket list introduces the idea that why not think of some new ideas, some things you haven't done before, some things that would be, you know, great to do if you can do them. And then the objective is try and achieve them, isn't it?
Yes.
Within that time. So I'm interested in how the family coped also of late when they had the revised information of your condition being a terminal one.
Again, I think they take their response from me. Whilst I'm strong, I think they find it very difficult to then cry or fall apart in front of me. My husband does find it difficult. Because I'm quite practical, I want to get on with sorting out the funeral, and I have pretty much sorted that out. But if I mention it or ask him any questions about it, he does find that really difficult. So I want to get that done quickly, and I keep saying as soon as that's done, I won't have to ask you any questions. My son, because he's far away, I think he finds it more difficult because he doesn't see when I'm well. He phones me far more than he ever did. He misses the baby as well, so he feels like he's missing out on being with his mum as well as the baby. Whereas before he'd perhaps come home 3 or 4 times a year. Now he wants to come home far more. So I think that's where the difference is with him. But so long as I talk to him every day, he's okay, you know, and fill him in with what I've done and let him know I'm okay. The girls are around. The middle one has obviously got the baby, so she's full of the baby. The youngest, the way she's coped all the way through is to have been at almost every single appointment, right from the original diagnosis. She's been to almost every chemo. She's been all through the radiotherapy. She's been to every oncologist appointment. And that's how she's coped all the way through, and I think that's how she'll continue to cope. My only really fear for her is that she's been so strong all the way through that maybe it'll really hit her afterwards. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on that and put in place, you know, my mum and my dad to kind of keep an eye on her. The middle daughter, because she's just had the baby as well, I've asked for help by her midwife and her health visitor to put support in for her. But at the minute, our house is not full of tears at all. Our house is full of laughter and, you know, memories and enjoying what we've all got together for as long as we have. And I think a lot of that is because that's how I am.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sitting there weeping and wailing, so how can they?
Let me ask you now about the outlook and the situation in general. So what's your understanding of where you're at right now and how your body's dealing with the cancer that's there?
Okay. In terms of prognosis, it's kind of mixed. At various times I've told it may be as long as 8 months. At other times that if the medication and the treatment that I'm on doesn't work, then it might be between 3 and 6 months, which is why I try not to think too far ahead. I think in small chunks in terms of small goals. In terms of how my body's coping with the treatment, I had 10 lots of radiotherapy to my head, Unfortunately, that did mean that I lost my hair for the second time, which was slightly upsetting. Less upsetting second time, having gone through it the first time. I decided to go for a completely different wig this time than previously, and I'm much happier with that this time. But it is something that I know, because it's radiotherapy to the head, it won't come back this time. In terms of the other treatment, the side effects of the chemotherapy initially were quite unpleasant, and I have recently spent 4 days in hospital with chronic diarrhea that they had to get back under control. That is now under control. I did have to have a week off of chemotherapy. I'm now back on that, and the hope is that the chemotherapy that I'm on might go up the open channel through to my brain, because generally chemotherapy doesn't. It's only the radiotherapy that can be, and the steroids that can be of any use to the tumours that are in my brain. The chemotherapy is for what's in the liver and the bones. But there is a slight hope that the chemotherapy that I'm on may make some difference to the brain. There is plans for another CT scan to have a look, but that's in a couple of sessions' time, so we will find out at that point. What I've basically been told is that things can either improve, they can stay the same, or they'll get worse. But until they do the CT scan, they won't know. But really, my condition and my standard of life at the moment is pretty much okay. There's not much I can't do other than getting a little tired, needing a little bit of a nap in the daytime. But there's very little that I can't do. So if things were to stay the same, I'd be happy. If they got better, obviously that would be brilliant, but that's probably too much for me to hope for at the moment, because things have gone so quickly. So staying the same as much as I hope for, and I pray that things won't get worse.
Now, I'm sure everybody's with you on that, in the sense they all want you to either improve or at least don't deteriorate. But let me play devil's advocate for a second, because you know you've already coped really well with all those steps that you've been through to date. What if there was a slight deterioration, or a new symptom that came up? Can you see yourself being able to manage that? In other words, can you see yourself being able to carry on day to day but cope with that slight setback?
Because there's been setbacks almost all the way along the way, yes, I think so. Because that's just the kind of person I am. I'll deal with it as it happens. I'll face front on, same as I have every other thing. I won't let it get me down. Maybe get me down for 5-10 minutes, but no, I won't let it get me down full time. I will carry on doing everything I possibly can until I really can't.
Yeah. Let's have a think for a second about what resources are around out there, that you may have come across or might recommend to somebody who in the future might be in your situation. What kind of things have been helpful for you? Either people or resources or other things?
I don't think I've used other resources other than my own inner resources. I have got a very, very strong family base and a very strong friends who, are always there for me and have been right from the beginning. But in terms of external resources, other than till this stage where I've had slight help with the very mild anti-anxiety tablet and the sleeping tablet, I haven't really needed anything. I've slept well. It's not kept me awake at night. I've just got on with it, really, because the chemotherapy initially, apart from being a little neutropenic, didn't make me too poorly. Radiotherapy wasn't hideous. So I've just been me, really, for as long as I can.
So that's actually quite important in itself, to know that you've got that inner strength, and that's your, valued resource, which is always with you in a way. I mean, you've had the family as well around, and I'm sure they've helped in their own way, but the prime source of help has been from yourself.
Yes, exactly. I do have faith too, as well as a Catholic, which I think does help. And I think it helps me to believe that dying young has a purpose, that God had a reason why he's going to take me early, and God had a reason why the baby was born when he was. My daughter got pregnant almost immediately after my diagnosis, and his name is Gift from God. And I do believe that he has been given to the rest of my family to hold them together after I've gone.
What has he been christened then?
He is going to be christened Theo, his name.
I see.
But he's going to be christened on the 28th.
Yes, that's great. So that has helped you as well, to some extent, to have that faith. And
yes.
Have you had that faith throughout? Has it stayed with you throughout?
Yes, I think it has. The belief that, God has a reason for everything. Mm-hmm. Even if I don't understand what the reasons are, there is a reason why he's going to take me early.
Yeah. Let's talk about what you see in the next few months for yourself. How do you anticipate things in that near view of the future?
I don't try to think too far in the future. Like I said, it's the small goals that I focus on. I try not to think about when I'm going to deteriorate, because that is what makes me sad. The thought that my family are going to have to watch me suffer makes me sad. So for the moment, whilst I'm well, I'm making the most of while I'm well, and not thinking too far about the bad things. I know they're going to come. I know I'm going to get worse. But until that really happens, I'll face that when it happens.
Yeah. Can you look at some positives though that you still want to do? Are there some things on your list that you've still got to tick off that you're looking forward to?
Little things, like I said, the small goals of being around for Theo's first Christmas, that it would be incredible to be around for his first Christmas. I've bought all of his first birthday presents from the age of 1 to 5, and they're wrapped up with the right cards and everything ready for him, so I can leave things behind. I'm also working on leaving memory boxes for the children, my husband and my parents. So those are things that are keeping me busy at the moment. Nothing major that is there set in fall. I'm going to go and watch a Leicester City football match with my son. It's harder sometimes to do things and have special times with sons than it is with daughters. It's easy to go for spa days and things like that with your daughters, but that's what he likes. And I love Bradgate Park. I spend a lot of time in Bradgate Park, and the kids will come with me and walk around there. Trips to the zoo. Just little family things, really. Just making the most of little family things.
Are those things, some of those things they've requested that you do together?
Yes, the spa day was something that my daughter reminded me that I'd done it with my other daughter, so I really ought to do it with her. But no, the rest are things that I've wanted to do as well.
What do you think has been the reaction of friends and colleagues to your illness? Have you felt that they've been able to help you through this journey?
They've been there, but they found it tough, very, very tough. In some ways, tougher, I think, than me, especially initially, because it was kind of a shock. because I had to give up work immediately. I got the diagnosis on the 10th of September. I'd have gone back into work that week, but the deputy head said, no, I don't think your head's going to be in the right place. You're not going to be able to concentrate, given the fact that I was a school teacher. Let's wait and see what they say on the 17th. So I kind of disappeared from work. And then on the 17th, when I got the diagnosis and told the deputy head, I was told that I couldn't go back to work at that point because of the risks of infection from children, because that's who I worked with as a school teacher. So it was very much, I disappeared. And there are a number of colleagues who I'm very, very close to who found it very, very difficult to cope. And since I've had the terminal diagnosis, friends who found it very difficult to cope and feel the need to be around me as much as they can, just to know that they am all right, because if they see me and they can see that I'm all right, and I am all right at the moment, then that makes them feel better. But I do think they have found it very hard to cope with, and I think they'll find it harder to cope with as time goes on. I have said a few goodbyes already to people that I see less, purely because when things get really bad, and when I do get really poorly, I won't want to see anybody other than my closest family. So I wanted to say some goodbyes early.
One thing that seems to have characterised your ability to cope with this is being very honest about your situation. So you haven't really held back from telling people the details in a way. In other words, they seem to know that the condition is time limited. That must have been difficult in its own way.
Not necessarily, because I told the deputy head, and once the deputy head knew, she kind of passed it on. They've already held a service to help the staff at the school, because it is a Catholic school that I worked at. So I didn't have to tell those. I don't have an issue telling people that it's time limited. My husband told a lot of our friends that it had spread, and that it had spread into my brain. The majority of them, I think, already knew what that would mean, because I think I'd always knew that I was going to get to this point. You know, it was a stage 3 right from the start. It was very aggressive. When they gave me the results after the operation, that I was given a poor prognosis then. So it wasn't a complete shock. I did hope that I might get a small break from it, that CT scan on the 3rd of the 5th would give me a short break from cancer. But I think I always knew I was going to fight it again. So I had warned people. I'd kind of said to friends and family, I don't think this is going to be over right, as soon as the radiotherapy is finished. I don't think it's going to be over. I have a feeling it's going to come back. So they weren't as surprised either, really. And that wasn't me being pessimistic, it was just a feeling that I'd already had, because I have actually been very positive throughout the entire thing, and looked at all the positives, and been grateful that I was not ill through all the chemo, grateful that the operation wasn't too bad, grateful that the radiotherapy didn't make me poorly. I was always very grateful, and looked at other patients who looked far more poorly than I did. So I did remain positive. It wasn't being negative, it was just a feeling that I'd always had. And maybe it comes down to the faith and a sense of that it was meant to be. What's happening is meant to be. So they found it difficult. they need to be around me, and that helps.
You mentioned there about seeing other patients, for example, on the wards. Was that something that you used to your advantage to speak to other patients, or it didn't really influence you in that way?
When I was on the wards, I was only really I tended to be in separate rooms, but there was one occasion when I was on a ward, actually after my surgery, and it was a lady who was just having reconstruction, and she had HER2 positive breast cancer, the same as mine was, and she'd been on Herceptin for 5 years, and that did help to see that actually Herceptin could work, and that that she was still around after 5 years. So for a while I did take heart from that, but because mine was HER2 positive, which is the less common one, I tended to come across less people with it. Majority of people are estrogen positive. So there were fewer people in my position. And even those that I did come across, nobody was in quite as difficult a position as I was right from the beginning, where it covered the entire breast and it was a stage 3.
Would you like to be, do you think we should, as a hospital, introduce people to others? I mean, that's partly what we're doing with the video diary, isn't it? To have a kind of option to see other people's stories. But do you think we should do it systematically for everyone?
I think it would have been useful for me to have been able to speak to somebody who was in a similar position to me earlier on. Not that I wasn't coping, because I have coped, but I think it would have been useful just to have met up with somebody who was in a similar kind of position, yes.
So you've been through a lot in a relatively small space of time, with a lot of information and a lot of hospital appointments, but it's remarkable that you're still maintaining a positive outlook and you're doing things which are, healthy, normal things. What would you say overall is your secret in a way, especially for other patients watching this afresh who are maybe they're struggling, at least at this moment right now, to get to the point emotionally where you're at? Is there anything you can say that they can use in a way?
Don't think that the cancer is the only thing in your life. Yes, it's a big part of your life, but don't let it take over your life. Enjoy the bits that aren't all about cancer. Yes, there are lots of hospital appointments, but there are days when you feel well, so do something positive. Don't sit around feeling sorry for yourself. Meet up with somebody for a cup of coffee, go for a walk, take some exercise. Don't wallow, because it doesn't help anybody. And if you are feeling good, if you can smile even though you're battling this disease, then other people will smile too. Other people feed off you. If you are positive, just because it's a good day, just because the sun's shining, then other people will be as well. If you're miserable, they don't want to be around you. So the trick is to just appreciate the little things and make the most of the little things, and certainly appreciate the good days. And there are a lot of good days. Fewer bad days than there are good days. Much fewer.
Well, Marion, that's been brilliant, an excellent account, and I really appreciate you coming in today. And I know the viewers will appreciate your honesty and your tips, because at the end of the day, you are facing a very difficult situation, but you are an inspiration, and I think people can take a lot from what you said today. So thanks very much.
Thank you.